So through our life, we enter different situations in life. In each situation, there is a socially constructed discourse. Discourse is not just about communication or language, as we saw in that example slide. Discourse is about also being, which also includes language and communication. For example, in the first slide that we saw, when a teacher enters a classroom, he is expected to have to dress in a particular way depending on where the educational institution is, in which country or which region. He is expected to discuss certain topics. He is expected to use a particular kind of language when he is in a classroom. He has a bag of words that he is supposed to use, which is deemed socially appropriate for that classroom situation. So when in our life, when we navigate through different settings, there are different discourses for each of those settings, and we adopt that discourse. So the words that we use are not, we now come to understand that the word that we use are not really ours. We are using the words that are prescribed in a particular situation. So now, when we earlier we have been thinking that the words that we use are ours and we are expecting an opinion. Whenever a communication happens, we are creating a message and delivered. But this now we learn that there is a particular set of words or ideas that are established and socially constructed. We are merely adopting them and reproducing those things. And this is what we call it as discourse. Discourse is not just about words and language, it is about the whole being in a particular situation. So, how are these discourses? What are these discourses and how do they come into being? They are all socially constructed. They are they are all reinforced socially and they are shaped not in one instant through time. Society comes and creates us different discourses for different societies, and within each discourse there are some cultural and societal norms and values, and in each situation we are expected to act within those societal norms and limits. Whenever we cross those limits, we are seen as different. For example, take this situation where it is a candlelight dinner and there is a conversation between a husband and wife. There, the husband calls his partner or his wife, "Sweetheart, I love this gift as much as I love you." So we can see the closeness. We can see it is an informal situation. We can see the choice of words that he uses to describe his wife as sweetheart. And the discussion here, and the topic of discussion is about a gift and the love. The gift is a symbol of, is an expression of his love that he has for his uh, better half. Now we take the situation or the setting of a classroom. We look at a typical discourse of a classroom, what it involves, how the teacher is expected to address the students by dear students. And look at the topics that are discussed here. Lessons, test. What kind of language is used? What kind of choice of words are used? What kind of a tone is used? In another situation, a different tone and different topic and different word choices. Here, different players, different kind of expectations. The topics, conversations are different in a different discourse. In a different setting, this is a different discourse. Altogether, the words, the attire, the character, uh, it all differs from situation to situation. And this is what we called as a discourse. Another example, in a courtroom scenario, the lawyer is expected to talk in a particular way, discuss certain issues, and address people in certain way. And the topics of he addresses the judges, Your Honor. To a wife, he may not say that, because if he calls his wife Your Honor, maybe she will find it inappropriate and it could lead maybe somewhere. So he's talking about a cold-blooded murder committed by the accused and is asking for a capital punishment. So we look at different situations and we see that different topics are discussed, different language and the word choice also differs. Another setting is when a politician assumes a stage and he talks in front of the electorate. He uses words like, my beloved brothers and sisters, don't lose hope, re-elect us. Here the topic is election and the idea communicated is hope. So now we understand that communication is more than mere language. It is a discourse. And these discourse are like possessions are cloud. And whenever you step into a situation, you adopt the discourse. As a teacher, we maybe at home when we are getting ready, maybe we will adopt the discourse of a husband or a father. Our choice of words will be to our children. Uh, we'll call them by name. We'll discuss about homework or tiffin box or time to school and the language and the way we communicate differs. The same way, when you enter your professional space, the same person cannot use the same words and discuss the same thing. Immediately, you assume a different discourse. So, discourse can be seen as a clouds floating above you. And when you step into a particular situation, you are possessed by that discourse. So when we communicate or adopt a discourse, what do we do? So there are different discourse analysis tools. These tools will help us understand what kind of discourses we adopt in a particular situation, or in a news discourse, what kind of discourse is happening in the newspaper. There are certain tools that will help us understand the discourse, study the discourse, and characterize that particular discourse. There are several tools developed by different experts over the years. And one such tool, discourse analysis tool, which is called social language. So social language, what it does is it examines as a discourse analysis. You may examine a particular utterance or a communication, and you should be able to tell who is doing what in that specific communication. So how do we understand? How do we understand who is doing what? Just by analyzing the specific language used or a bag of words used. For example, in this situation, when the teacher says, dear students, the results are now complete. Now get ready for the test. So the person here is adopting the discourse of a teacher discourse, and she's the using the social language of a teacher, a traditional or formal teacher. And what is she trying to do? She's trying to prepare the students for the test, or you can say she is warning, or she's communicating a certain idea. So by just looking the bag of words or the specific language used, we should be able to analyze the social language that is being used in a communication in a particular situation, which is nothing but identifying who is doing what. Every social group have their own language. For example, a lawyer has his own social language. He has a particular word like your honor. He has a particular way of addressing certain people. A traffic policeman will have a different bag of words in his kitty. Maybe when you're caught in a traffic police, the traffic policeman may not say dear honor. He may use a different language, a different descriptive or a word to address you. So the first tool is about social language. And the second tool is about figured worlds. Figured worlds are nothing but social model of a typical setting. In our life or reality is very complicated. So, to simplify things, we create social models in our head. For example, in a classroom setting, what would be a traditional classroom? How a traditional classroom should be? We would have already created a social model based on our experiences and what others say and what is usually communicated. For example, when you say classroom, what is the social model that comes in your mind? Classroom would be a big airy room with a lot of desk where in a typical classroom students are seated, the teacher is standing, the information flows from the information is expected to flow from the teacher to the students. What are the expectations about the teacher? Teacher should be learned. He is expected to have more information, more expertise or subject knowledge, while the students are expected not to have great knowledge, but they are expected to be interested or listen. There are certain expectation to different players in different settings. So this, when we say about everything in our life, we have created social models, because at every point of life we don't need to analyze everything to understand the situation. So we have created a model. For example, even for a person, we have created a social model of a good person and a bad person. So immediately when we see a person, quickly in a jiffy or in a matter of seconds, we categorize that person as good, bad, pretty or ugly, everything based on our social norms that we are sitting. We try to fit things in that social model. Always it is not there are always exceptions, but there are also social models that are created. And the language or communicate, whenever somebody communicates based on their word choices and the way they have communicated, we are able to understand what kind of figured words or social models that particular communication reflects. So a figured world would include analysis of the typical settings and the players or the participants in that setting and their roles and expectations. Altogether, this is called figured worlds. It has different meanings: social model, cultural model. Different people have different names for this particular tool, and this is also deducible by analyzing the discourse that we come across. For example, if you want to analyze who's doing what, so this is a warning on an aspirin bottle, which reads, warnings. Children and teenagers should not use this medication for chickenpox or flu symptoms before a doctor is consulted about Reye syndrome, a rare but serious illness reported to be associated with aspirin. Keep this and all drugs out of reach of children. In case of accidental overdose, seek professional assistance or contact a poison control center immediately. As with any drug, if you if you are pregnant or nursing a baby, seek the advice of a health professional before using this product. It is especially important not to use aspirin during the last 3 months of pregnancy unless specifically directed to do so by a doctor, because it may cause problems in the unborn child or complications during delivery. See carton for arthritis use, an important notice. Can you can you read this warning? Can you analyze the words used, and can you answer the question, who's doing what here? Can anybody try to answer the question by analyzing this warning? Sir, you can relay some of the comments that come in the chat box if somebody is
Okay.
able to identify who's doing what.
Yeah.
You can analyze the language or the word choices made here? And can you tell who is trying to do what through this communication?
So there's one comment saying that doctors.
So the person who does it sound like coming from a doctor?
Yeah, medical practitioners, medicine manufacturers, pharmacy people. These were the comments, sir.
Okay.
Messages
So
for the.
when
Yes, sir. Go
yeah,
ahead, sir.
so when we try to understand the language and see who's trying to do what. For example, you can read the first thing, the highlighted text here. Children and teenagers should not use this medication for chicken pox or flu symptoms before a doctor is consulted about Reye syndrome, a rare but serious illness reported to be associated with aspirin. Keep this and all drugs out of reach of the children. We have to analyze the language used here. Here, the person here he mentions the person as doctor. He's addressing the uh, person as children and teachers, and he's addressing the person as doctor is consulted about thing. And it is also said it is especially important not to use aspirin during last 3 months of pregnancy unless, so it is saying don't, it is important not to use aspirin during the last 3 months of pregnancy unless specifically directed to do so by a doctor. So here we identify the language used it has a lawyerly voice. So which social language? So by analyzing the words that are used here, we identify that these word choices belong to the lawyers. A lawyer only will use these kind of words. And what they are trying to do, they are trying to respond to specific potential legal problems and court cases. So by giving this warning, they are trying to avoid specific legal problems that may arise out of the use of this particular drug. So by analyzing this thing, the choice of words, we are able to tell it uses a lawyerly voice and what they are trying to actually do in this particular conversation. On the other hand, this particular sentence, in case of accidental overdose, seek professional assistance or contact a poison control center immediately. Earlier, the person is termed as a doctor. You should consult a doctor, they are saying. Here they are saying that seek professional assistance or poison control center immediately. If with any drug, if you are pregnant or nursing a baby, seek this. The same thing is called as a health professional before using this product. Earlier we see that the person who is termed as doctor, here the person is addressed as health professional. So who will call them doctor and who will call them health professional? So these are the cues that are live within the communication, which will help us find out which these words, word choices or language belongs to which social group, and through this communication, what they are actually trying to do. When we critically analyze this particular sentence, we are able to say that it is an official voice of a caring, authoritatively knowledgeable company who is trying to protect and advise the users of their drug. Here we see that there is some care and concern which is perceivable, and it is all through the analysis of the word and the language. In the earlier case, we see that it is a kind of a lawyerly voice which is trying to distance itself and warn so that it won't be held liable for any kind of complication that arises out of the use of this particular drug. Now we are analyzing another example where where the same person writes the same thing A same idea is written by the same person in a professional journal and a popular science magazine. The same idea is communicating. When he is writing in a journal, he writes about experiments show that heliconius butterflies are less likely to oviposit on host plants that possesses eggs or egg-like structures. These egg mimics are unambiguous example of a plant trait evolved in response to a host-restricted group of insect herbivores. That is, certain plants to avoid insects depositing eggs on their leaves. If insects deposit eggs on their leaves, what it will do? It will hatch, it will become worms. The worms will feed on the leaves and the plant will suffer. So what to intuitively avoid this kind of a predicament, what the plant or the plant does it produces egg-like structures in its leaf. So when the insect comes, so when the insect comes, so when the insect comes, sir, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are.
Yeah, I can continue. Okay. So when the insect comes to lay eggs, it already sees egg-like structures on the plant and it avoids that plant. So to escape the insect laying eggs, the plant comes up with egg-like structures. When this idea is written in a journal, uh, the the expert or the scientist writes in this way. But when he tries to convey the same idea in a science magazine, see what is it? This is all picked up from the same thing, from real documents. Heliconus butterfly lay their eggs on Passiflora vines. In defense, the vines seem to have evolved fake eggs that make it look to the butterflies as if eggs have already been laid on them. So, in the professional journal, experiments show that a research kind of language is used. Here, more journalistic language is used. So, see, the same things are expressed in different words are used. So here, for example, egg mimics or egg-like structures are used. They're host plants. It is used here. It is Passiflora vines. Heliconius butterflies are common. So in defense, the vines seem to have evolved eggs that make it look like. So see the word choices, it make it look like. So it is more colloquial, but there is more formal language in the left-hand side and less formal and more journalistic language, which is and also it is for written for the general readers here in a science magazine. There could be general readers. This is on the left side, the communication is for the scholarly community, and hence the word choices differ. So we understand that depending on the situation, even the same person, his choice of words differ. So when we analyze a discourse, we try to answer this tool through the social identity tool, social language tool. We try to answer the question that which social identity or community the language represents. Since our view about communication has changed, we are looking at it as discourse. Then when we analyze a particular discourse, we try to find which language, what kind of language is used. Sorry. So when we analyze a particular discourse, we try to examine the language and we try to analyze which social identity or community those words or language represents. So figured worlds, which we had discussed earlier, It is also called typical stories, folk stories, mental models, cultural models, or social models. So the world may be a complicated space. And for easy understanding, we have typified things. We have simplified things. We have typical settings, participants, roles, and expectations. These social models are built in our head so that every time we need not be fully examining all situation. So we can use the mental models created in our minds to understand a situation or setting. Even theories in science are simplified views of the world because the world is a very complicated space. So even the science and the theories are nothing but simplified views of the in fact complicated world meant to help scientists cope without having to deal with the full complexity of the world that we live in all at once and every now and then. So when we communicate or adopt a discourse, what happens? Earlier we thought we are generating a communication. We are uh, transferring our idea, but we see that there is intertextuality. That is, what we talk is always we find that there is something already spoken and sometimes more or less it is adopted in here. For example, when you look at a movie or a communication in a movie, if you see there is intertextuality. For example, when we talk, we use the words of a comedian or a famous hero. We use the dialogues spoken by them in the movies. We tend to use them in our speech. We see when we analyze different kinds of communication or a communication in a particular setting, we find that there is a lot of intertextuality. There is a lot of reproduction duplication. So the next discourse analysis tool is conversations, which looks into the events, issues, sides, and arguments. In any discourse, in any setting, there are certain events that happen within a discourse. Certain issues are discussed. When certain issues are discussed, there are sides to it, opposing sides to it, and there are certain kinds of arguments associated with it. You take the case of smoking. So there are different sides. One is the manufacturers of cigarettes. Another is the consumers of cigarettes. And the another group is which opposes the smoking. What is their argument? The people who oppose smoking, they take the topic of health. They take the topic of third party pollution. And what are the topic or issues taken by the side who are the manufacturers or who want to support smoking? They would take up things like liberty, personal choice. So we see when we analyze language, we are able to, if we critically closely analyze language or any kind of communication, we are able to see which the language used belongs to which social group, what kind of social models or cultural models are reflected in them, what kind of intertextuality happens there. That is, this particular communication borrows from which other popular text, and what kind of conversation is happening, what issues are discussed, who are these sides, which sides do they represent, and what kind of arguments and debates they are putting forth. So as we see now, mass communication is being viewed as media discourses. Earlier we used to ask who said what with what effect. But now since the meaning of communication is changing, as we are looking at it as a discourse, we now and then come across this term discourse. What we used to call communication is in various forums it is addressed as discourse. Now when communication is viewed as a discourse, we are not asking who said what with what effect. We are asking the question who said what using which social language, representing which social identity. With what intention? With what values and beliefs? Discussing which events and issues? What are the sides and arguments? What are the ideologies and politics behind those communication? What are the power plays that define those discourses? Earlier, we used to believe that when we communicate, we share new information. But now we come to understand that when we engage in a discourse, when we communicate, we recycle discourses that that we are familiar with. So we come to understand that communication is not mere transfer of information. So communication itself is a social construction. Now we come to the second part of this presentation. The first part is our understanding about communication is changing. Now we come to the second part where we come to understand that our understanding about truth and reality is also changing. So this is a famous quote: a lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth can get its boots on. Can somebody tell whose quote this is? Sir, I may need your help again to relay the comments.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
For this quote, a lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth can get its boots on. Can you say whose quote this is? Are there
Mark.
any comments?
Dr. Bhuvana said it's Mark.
Mark Twain. So if you do a Google search, you'll get this result. So it says this quote comes from Winston Churchill. Also, you will find that this quote is Mark Twain and this quote comes from Charles Spurgeon.
Okay.
So this quote doesn't belong to anybody. But when you search the internet, you get like this. See, a lie, this is a quote about lie, and there are so many lies spread on this quote itself. So that is an irony. You can just Google this quote, you will come across more people associated with this quote. So which is truth? So we come to this concept of post-truth. Nowadays, you see this term also, post-truth, also being that pop up in several communication forums. People come across this. They say that we are now in the post-truth era. So earlier we believed that there was a single truth and a single reality that belonged to the positivist paradigm, which believed in objectivity. Next, when we shifted to the interpretive paradigm, we came to this scholars belonging to this paradigm or with this frame of mind believe that there is no single reality, there is multiple reality, and these realities are based on are interpretive, or it depends on the beholder or the subject. But now we come to a state where we enter the post-truth era. In the post-truth era, or in this kind of a paradigm, we understand that there is no truth. So here is a definition for the post-truth: relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion that appeals to emotion and personal belief. So here, when we see for example, when we see the news discourses on television debates, the there is the facts are unimportant. The factual people are not giving importance to the factual information, but whoever is loud, whoever is bold, whoever is creative in their communication, what they say we believe. Whatever certain media says, we tend to believe it is truth. We still believe what all is said in the newspaper is true. So the value for facts is facts are losing its shine because we have entered this post-truth era. So this concept of post-truth, it is now the object of increasing scholarly attention and public debate. Its popular and academic treatments sometimes differ in respect to its meaning, but most associate it with communication forms such as fake or false news, rumors, hoaxes, and political lie. Possible causes. There's a lot of polarization and unethical politicians who, even if it is truth or false, they say it with conviction. They try to evoke some emotions, and whatever they said are believed. So another possible cause is the undeclared social media, where unverified information is circulated. And also in the mainstream media, shoddy journalism happens, or simply the inevitable chaos by the humongous amount of information that is flowing through all the digital media technologies. These are all the main contributors to the post-truth belief. Post-truth is sometimes posited as a social and political condition whereby citizens or audiences and politicians no longer respect truth, but simply accept as true what they believe or feel. We also, whenever we communicate, whenever read a news story or communicate with each other, now and then we are engaging in constant comparison, and at every instant we try to discern things, and we whatever we discern, we believe it as true based on just our assumptions. However, more rigorously, post-truth is actually a breakdown of social trust, which encompasses what was formerly the major institutional truth teller or publicist, the news media. So, because the onslaught of social media, the news media had to adopt. It started to embrace the social media way of communication, and because of that, there is now a widespread lack of trust. It is losing trust because the way it has progressed in the recent years. So now we understand that truth and reality are also social construction. Earlier we find that communication is social construction. Now we come to understand that truth and reality are also social construction. So these understandings are shifting the way we conduct our research, what kind of questions we ask, what kind of analysis we perform. So these as the meanings of communication, as our understandings of our communication are shifting, it is also altering the things that we research and analyze and the ways in which we do it. So we are entering the critical communication studies. Earlier, when we did communication research, For example, when we analyze news stories, we mostly looked at identifying media bias, who supported who. But now when we view news as discourse, the the research problems or the critical questions that we ask differs. Now we ask, what are the politics behind the media discourses? For example, whenever a gang rape happens, we see that usually the news media comes up with a typical stories which says that women's safety, there is no women's safety. The government is not providing ensuring women's safety. There is fear, there is fear and threat. After the Nirbhaya case, for example, they are saying that Delhi is unsafe for women. The government has failed to provide uh, women's safety. Women needs protection. So if you had seen it as a earlier thing as news as a communication, you would have felt that okay, this newspaper or this news article are in support of women. They are actually supporting women. But when you look at it as a discourse, you find that it is not really supporting women. It is actually establishing or reproducing archaic ideas and ideologies and establishing in women as a weaker sex who are incapable of protecting themselves and who needs the protection of others because they can't ensure their own safety. So these kind of things comes, these kind of question when we ask, when we look at communication as discourse. And we ask the other question, how media and politics propagate certain discourses and profit for them. For example, a rape happens or a conflict erupts. How the news media gives a sensationalist coverage of it, how it increases its readership through that kind of coverages, through sensationalism, how it calls rape as horror, Kolkata horror or Manipur horror, how it calls rape as horror, how it dehumanizes a crime, as if how it makes a monster out of the accused. How and we when we analyze this, when we try to now in these days in contemporary research, we try to analyze how media and politics propagate or gain from all these discourses. It is all possible because we have an altered view about discourse.